Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Today, my guest is Alan Stein. Alan, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Chris.
Awesome. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you got going on.
So I'm Alan Stein Jr. I'm a professional keynote speaker and former basketball performance coach, and I'm in Dallas to speak for an event for AT&T, and just excited to be here, man. Excited to chop it up.
I got lots of questions for you. So I was looking at your website and your social media stuff. You've worked with a lot of high-profile NBA players, and like that has to be really super cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my career really started with focusing at the high school and middle school age level because that's the area that I thought I could make the biggest impact on. But once I started working with that age and was able to work at two different high schools in the Washington, D.C. area that ended up producing dozens of NBA players, that afforded me opportunities with some contract work with Nike and with Jordan Brand and with USA Basketball, and then had an opportunity to kind of crack that NBA shell and work with some elite level players. And working with and working for and working alongside elite level players. I'm very observant by nature, so I was constantly picking up their routines and their habits and their mindsets and their disciplines and the things that they did to be elite. And I now take that stuff and I transfer it to everybody, to folks in the business world, to parents, to really anyone that's looking to excel and achieve excellence.
That was one of my biggest things. Was I'm on this huge Tony Robbins trip, right? And Alex Hormozi as well, because I watched that whole interview.
Yeah.
And one of the things Tony Robbins talks about is, like, I guess he's like part owner of the Warriors at some point, right? And he was talking about Steph Curry and all that stuff. Working with pro athletes at like elite levels, like what do you really see? Because Tony talks about it a lot of like just staying in state. And then like with Tom Brady, he just used as an example, like you have these certain bursts where you're like, you focus 100% of your energy on that thing, and like your testosterone, right? He has like this whole, because he did like a medical study, or they had a medical study on him for like 3 years and stuff. And when you focus, like your testosterone level like goes through the roof, right? And you have to like maintain that state and focus all that stuff. What have you seen as like patterns with these elite players?
Well, the ability to obsessively focus is certainly one of them. I mean, they're relentless in their obsession with working on their craft and getting better. I could probably come up with an exhaustive list of about a dozen things that elite high performers do on a consistent basis. But I'll tee up three that I've noticed have such high utility, because these three, they work in business, they work in basketball, they work in just about any area of life. The first is they have a respect and appreciation for the fundamentals. They know that, and this was a line that I actually heard from Kobe Bryant when I first met him. He said, the best never get bored with the basics. So they work on mastery of the fundamentals of their craft, and they're relentless in their obsession over that. The second thing they do is they learn to earn their confidence by getting in repetitions during the unseen hours, but then they blend that confidence with humility. And humility is what keeps them open to feedback, keeps them open to being coached. And humility is what reminds them that no matter how good they get, they know they can still get better. And I found that combination of confidence and humility is a really powerful cocktail. And then the third thing they do an amazing job of is they have a very narrow focus of the goals that they're trying to achieve, but they don't really focus on the goal. Instead, they focus on the process. They focus on what's right in front of them. They wake up every single day and say, what can I do today? Or what can I do in this workout? Or what can I do in this film session to take me just a little bit closer to my goal, whatever that may be? And they're so process focused, they realize that the scoreboard, if you will take care of itself if you focus on the process.
I noticed you mentioned Kobe. Like, I was going to get to this question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Like, what was it like working with him? Because I watch sports, and everybody kind of knows his work ethic. Like, he worked really, really hard to get where he was. I think, and I'm not trying to put anybody down or anything, but when he entered the league, he was, a high school player, and then he had to learn to, obviously try to master and keep up with Jordan and other people that are in the league. Talk to me about just meeting him and what it was like, and just kind of his mentality.
Sure. Well, per what I just said, his goal was to be the greatest player to ever play the game. But every day when he woke up, he had to ask himself, what can I do today to inch me closer to reaching that goal? And his obsession towards working towards that was I mean, unparalleled. I had a chance to meet him in 2007 when I worked the first ever Kobe Bryant Skills Academy. I was hired by Nike to work with the players at the camp, and I got to watch one of Kobe's really early morning workouts. And I remember as a young coach at that time being very surprised that he just kept drilling down on basic drills. I mean, for the first 30 or 40 minutes, he was just working on pivoting and footwork and really basic stuff. I mean, stuff that normally you would teach to a middle school age player, but he wanted to make sure that he could perfect every single aspect of his game as he continued to build his game and work on more advanced techniques. And that was where he said that line to me, because I had asked him later that day at camp. I said, Kobe, you know, you're the best player in the world. Why were you doing such basic drills this morning? And he said, well, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Is because I never get bored with the basics. And that idea of simplifying success and focusing on the fundamentals kind of immediately became my calling card, and I applied that to everything I do. Now, another time I had a conversation with him, and he elaborated on and explained why he did really early morning workouts. I mean, he was starting at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and he said the most dedicated players in the NBA, the other guys that are trying to win championships, trying to be the greatest of all time, they work out twice a day in the off season. I mean, these are the most ambitious players there are. And he said, if I only do what they do, then it's hard for me to create any separation. It's going to be hard for me to be better than them if we're all doing the same thing, putting in the same work. So he said, I needed to do a little bit more than them. So if they're going to work out twice a day, I need to work out 3 times a day. And he started to break it down, and he said, you know, that means I'm coming home from my first workout while you're getting to the gym for your first workout. And then when you're coming home from your first workout, I'm getting to the gym for he's like, I'll always be one step ahead. And he said something really profound. He said, you know, in one off season, that's not going to create very much separation. But if I can do that every off season, and in his case, for a 20-year career, that's what creates that type of separation. And one important note, though, for your viewers and your listeners is I don't want the moral of that story to be that more is better. Because in most areas of life, more is not better. Right. What I want the moral to be is each of us needs to figure out what we do and what we have control over that can create some separation with our competition, and we need to double down on that. And I think if you have the awareness and the appetite for improvement to figure out what separates you from your competition in any field, regardless of what you do, and you can double down on that, it's a very worthy investment.
I got into this whole you know, what Tony Robbins thing, where he talks about eventually you're going to look at yourself in the mirror. Let's say you're like overweight, or you just don't like some aspect of yourself, right? And eventually you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and you're going to get pissed off. And you're going to say, like, I've had enough. Like, enough is enough. And I think everybody kind of goes through that phase, whatever it is, like whether it's finances, or love life, weight, whatever it is, right? And you say, hey, look, like, enough is enough. I'm going to make this change. I hate my life. Like, we're going to, like, this is it, right? I've had enough. And then what usually happens, and Tony was really right, is that you just become distracted. Like, something will happen. You decide that you're going to go, you know, start dating somebody else, or you're going to decide that the pain isn't painful enough for you to get up off the couch, you know, and David Goggins stuff, or even Kobe when Allen Iverson went to go pick him up. And he picked him up, and he was like, you know, what are you going to go do, or whatever, and then, or vice versa, whoever picked him up. And he was like, well, I'm going to go to the gym. And Allen Iverson's like going to the club, you know. So, you know, it's just, you end up getting distracted. And I end up doing a lot of that stuff. Like, I'll look at myself in the mirror, and I'll be like, okay, well, like, I don't like the person that I'm looking at. I need to make a change. And I go through this whole, you know, eating glass kind of moment where I just make these changes and go through it. And then it's like there's a motivation lapse, right? Because like you can have a lot of motivation in the beginning, and then it like kind of starts to disappear because you get distracted, and then motivation kind of wears off. You think you're doing all right. Yeah. And then before you know it, like you're kind of right back in the pot again. Do you like come across that a lot with just teaching and motivating people and going out and talking and speaking to people?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because ultimately what you're saying is we have the pain and the discomfort of changing, But then there's also a pain and discomfort in staying the same. And you have to figure out which one of those is more painful. And when it's that pain of staying the same is actually more uncomfortable than the changes you're trying to make, that's usually what will at least start forcing you in that direction. But I'm so glad that you brought that up because, first of all, if you experience that, what you just shared, the waning of motivation, all that means is that you're human. That is part of the human condition. There's nobody on this planet that is 100% motivated 100% of the time. And that's because motivation is a feeling. What I try and teach and preach on stage and on page is that we need to strengthen our ability to make disciplined decisions. Discipline will beat motivation in the long run all of the time. And that is because motivation is a feeling. Just like any other emotion that we experience, it will ebb and flow. There are times you, myself, anybody else in the world feel more motivated than other times. And one of the things that I've found, and actually I found this kind of frustrating, is the times in my life when I need motivation are usually when it's nowhere to be found. It's when you're stressed. It's when you're overwhelmed. It's when you're sad. It's when you're feeling low. That's actually when you could use a nice shot of motivation, and you can't find it anywhere. So instead, what I try and teach is to make disciplined decisions, because discipline is a choice. Discipline is a decision that you make in the moment. So if we rely on motivation, then our performance and our output is going to be very inconsistent because our motivation is going to ebb and flow. However, we always have the ability to make disciplined decisions. And the way I define discipline, a disciplined decision is a decision that takes you slightly closer to either the goal you've set or the person you're trying to become. So, and you could look at that through the lens of any decision that you have to make. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're going to eat for breakfast, to who you choose to follow on Instagram, to what podcast you choose to listen to. Ask yourself, does doing this thing take me a little bit closer to my goal or a little further away? Does it take me a little closer to the man I'm trying to become or a little further away? And if the answer is it takes you closer, then in that moment, that is a disciplined decision. And for me personally, I just try to make as many disciplined decisions as I can every single day in every area of my life. As a business owner, as a speaker, as an author, as a content creator, as a father, as a member of my community, I want to make as many disciplined decisions as I can. But it's really important that you notice that I didn't say perfection. No one makes all perfect decisions or all disciplined decisions because, again, we're human and we're fallible and we're flawed. And occasionally we're going to make undisciplined decisions. And for me, when I do that, the first thing I do is I give myself some grace and space to be human and less than perfect. And the second thing I do is I just try to learn a lesson from it and then try to stack that one in my memory bank and say, hey, next time I have a similar opportunity, I'm going to choose the more disciplined route.
How does that work with this whole, I know it's like a trend, and I saw this, I watched, I'm a big Navy SEAL and like Special Forces guy.
Yeah.
Like I love that kind of stuff. I wish I definitely missed the boat. Like, I missed my calling, but I watched that stuff, and this guy read this letter, and the guy was like, I'm overweight, trying to get into buds, and like a lot of the buds regimen is already like documented. You know what you have to do. There's just, it's just a school, right? And the guy was like, the answer. And he was reading it. He's like, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, look, like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't like the person that I'm become. And I have to like hunker down for the next 6 months and become like a monk, right? Like that's like this new wave that's kind of going on. Everybody's like, oh, take 6 months off, just work on yourself, stay silent and all that stuff. Is that really true? I mean, can you really hold that for 6 months, or is it a lot of motivation like you're talking about and then discipline all the way through?
Well, it's probably a yes and instead of an either or.
Okay.
I'm always very leery of any one size fits all. So I don't know that recipe works for everybody walking the planet. I think there's a portion of people that would work really well for, and then there might be a portion of people where it doesn't. That's why I'm so big on self-awareness and getting to know yourself and know what types of frameworks and constructs work. You had mentioned David Goggins before. David Goggins has a very abrasive and straightforward approach. And for some of the population, that is exactly what they need. And he speaks brilliantly to them, and he gets them to change, make life changes. But then there's another portion of the population that's not the best fit for, that they need someone that takes a different approach. And it's not David's job to fit for everybody.
Right.
Like he does what he does, and he does it really, really well. but it's okay that if his style doesn't resonate with you and you need to try something different. For someone to say, hey, I'm going to take 6 months and really focus on myself and try to make more disciplined decisions and try to focus on the process to get me closer to where I'm trying to go. I mean, that overarching framework I think would be good for anyone, but the exact way that you attack it, the amount of grace and space that you give yourself when attacking it, I think is going to be different for everybody.
Because he talks a lot about like stacking days, and I always remember that. It's like and even Andy Frisella, he talks about like a 75 hard for a really good example is just you're just stacking days. Like the first couple of days, you got a lot of momentum, and then you get into like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you're like, dude, I got to go for another walk. I got to go outside and exercise. Like, I got to read another chapter. Like, it's just, and you get to the point, I mean, even with the podcast, we were kind of joking about it last time I was in here, and it was just like, I think I got into the 50s, and I was just like, oh, like, this is exhausting. It's like, am I ever going to see 100 episodes? It's like, am I ever going to see 200 episodes? And, then you hit past that milestone, you get 100, and you're like, whew, that was cool. Like, now I could do 100. I know what that 100 felt like to get there. But talk about a little bit about, maybe just some people that have audiences, entrepreneurs, small business owners, just having confidence. I know Tony Robbins talks a lot about confidence and state and matching the mental to the physical. But, a lot of small business owners, a lot of, entrepreneurs, maybe they're not there yet. They're not willing to accept that quite yet. They're more head down. I got to get this thing done. I'm trying to make this thing work. What do you recommend for having like just absolute confidence?
Well, first, let me take a step back before I answer that,
Sure.
because you touched on consistency, which is so important, because consistency is a controllable superpower. We all have the ability and the opportunity to be consistent. Now, whether we do or not is a completely different discussion. And so the concept of stacking days is something I really resonate with. And I love the idea of stacking days. And that's why I like a program like a 75 hard. But where I tend to have a slightly softer approach than maybe an Andy Frisella is if on day 45, you miss, once again, because you're human, you're fallible, and you're flawed. See, I don't think that's a reason to throw everything out the window or to have some negative self-talk. I think you just acknowledge that, hey, I had a good streak going. I missed today, but I'm not going to miss 2 days in a row. I'm going to pick right up tomorrow, and I'm going to start my streak again. And you give yourself some grace and space, because I think perfection is what can often stifle us. And if we sit here and tell ourselves, hey, I have to be absolutely perfect for the next 75 days, that can often make folks feel somewhat claustrophobic, somewhat de-incentivized. So instead, I just believe in just focus on the next play or just focus on the next day. Like, don't worry about doing 75 days in a row. Just worry about doing today, because that's really all that you have right in front of you. But I do believe that when you start to consistently make disciplined decisions, that is actually the first step to building confidence, which is the original question. So there's a few things we can do to increase and build our confidence. And I want folks to know that it is something we build. It's something we create. It's something we earn. It's not something we're anointed or we're born with. And you first build confidence by making disciplined decisions consistently. We call this demonstrated performance. When you show that you can do something and you show you have competence, then you will actually increase your confidence. So you need to put yourselves in positions where you can feel yourself being successful. That's the reason I like 75 hard. It has a very basic checklist of what you need to do. It's 2 workouts a day. One of them has to be outside. I think it's read a certain number of pages, drink a certain amount of water, whatever it is, but it's a checklist that each of us are capable of doing on any given day. And as long as you go through and you check each of those things, then today was a win. Even if your body didn't change, even if your mindset hasn't changed, you still won the day by doing those things. And then the secret is to just stack days. But once you start seeing yourself getting those check marks, you'll start to build confidence. So that's number one. The second thing we need to do to build confidence is we have to keep the promises we make to ourselves. We all make promises to ourselves, and we'll keep using the 75 hard as an example. If you tell yourself that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to get my first outdoor workout in of the day so I can complete 75 hard. If you wake up at 5 a.m. and you do that workout, you will strengthen your confidence because you kept the promise you made to yourself. If instead you hit the snooze button and you pull the covers over your head and you choose to skip the workout, you will momentarily undermine your confidence or erode your confidence because You betrayed your trust. You lied to yourself. So once again, this is not about perfection, but it's about keeping as many of the promises that we make to ourselves as we possibly can. And then the last thing for building confidence is we have to be very aware of that little voice in our head, our self-narrative, our self-talk. And I'm a believer of talking to myself in an empowering way, in a way that builds me up and helps strengthen my confidence, instead of talking to myself in a way that's very critical and very judgmental. And the best way I can explain that is I try to talk to myself the same way I would talk to a friend or a loved one, the same way I would talk to a child. I know you and I are just getting acquainted, but let's just say we're longtime friends of 20 years. If you called me up and said, Alan, man, I just had the roughest day. I had 4 podcast interviews today. None of them went well. They all went off the rails. The last thing I would do as your friend would be to criticize you or to judge you or to be like, yeah, I'm not surprised, Chris, you're an idiot. I knew that would happen. Or, right. Man, you're so lazy. You never put in I would never say something like that to you. But how many times do people say those things to themselves? Say things like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. Or man, I'm such an idiot for messing that up. Like they talk to themselves in a way they would never talk to another human being. So I'm really, and this is something I've been working on a lot in my life, is really trying to talk to myself in an empowering way. Now, this doesn't mean I don't hold myself to a really high standard. This is not about letting yourself off the hook. This is not about being casual. This is not about saying that a low performing day is everything's okay, everything's fine. It's about saying, hey, what happened, happened. I'm going to learn a lesson from it, but I'm going to try and coach myself to higher performance instead of beat myself up. And if we can do those things consistently, then the trajectory of our confidence will be going up.
I've been doing a lot of incantations, and I'm sure the audience probably doesn't know, but the whole Tony Robbins thing, and I have it like taped on my BMW or my car, it doesn't matter, on the HVAC, like or the AC unit, right? So I can see it. It's a Post-it note. I can see it every single day, and I do it 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times, whatever it takes, to keep that state. Like I just been trying to hold a particular state of just, I wouldn't say like anger, just pissed off that I let something get to where it is, and now I have to fix it. And I have to use all my focus and all my energy to focus just on that. No distractions, no nothing. And I'm going to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see how long I can hold it, because it's difficult. It's difficult to hold that kind of motivation and that, I wouldn't say anger or whatever, but that state for that long, to be that motivated to get it done. And I'm going to hold it. I'm going to see how far I can go with it. What do you recommend, to kind of change the subject a little bit?
Sure.
What do you recommend for a business owner or an entrepreneur? Because I was in the same boat. And the reason why I was in the same boat, I'm a very positive person.
Yeah.
But I was around, I had a now ex-girlfriend that was just very negative. Right. So that negativity, just where you were saying, like, Chris, this podcast is never going to work out. You'll never hit 100 episodes, this and that and that. And eventually that beats you down. And you get down, you can start off as very, very high, super enthusiastic, very confident in yourself. And then you're listening to that and it's like just ratcheting down until you're almost here. And then you start believing it because it's somebody's negative in your face all the time. And I'm sure I'm not alone. Like, I'm sure there's tons of people out there that their spouse is like, honey, like, you keep aiming at this thing and you keep missing. Honey, you keep working 16, 18 hours a day, but we don't see any money coming in. Honey, like, this thought is stupid. Honey, like, this and that, just a whole rack of negativity. I don't like negativity. I usually push it off.
Yeah.
Like, what do you recommend for someone that's in that state and they can't get away from that situation? Because it's obviously a loved one. I mean, what are they going to do? Just like break up and move into their car or something, right? Like, a lot of the people are just kind of stuck. Like, what kind of tips or tricks or things that you can do to help protect somebody that's in a state like that and change it?
Well, several things. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that and your honesty in sharing that. Ultimately, what you're bringing up is how important our environment is. Who we spend time with, where we spend time. And I'm not just talking about the physical environment, but the environment of our relationships, the environment of the people we're around, we have to really protect. There's a phrase I use, which is guard your yard. you got to guard your yard. You have to be very, very careful and have such high discernment over who you let in your yard. Because as you just said, someone that has this toxic negativity that's consistently negative, it will start to pollute you and your mindset and your belief system. And it will, as you just said so perfectly, it will slowly start to erode. So we have to guard that. Now, in many instances, we do have the ability to siphon off the time we spend with others. Like, we can choose to spend less time. I mean, if you happen to be a toxic, negative person in my life, I'm going to slowly but surely make sure we spend less and less time together. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic breakup of, Chris, I never want to see you again because you were really negative today. Right. But it can just be like, hey, man, every time I hang out with you, I feel less about myself. Like, I don't feel good when we're done hanging out. And first of all, I wanted to make sure you're aware of that, because I don't know if you know that you're doing that. But to be honest with you, man, I got to guard my yard. And unless something on your end changes, I'm just not interested in spending more time with you. And I believe in having that conversation. Now, does that become trickier if you are married to the person, or if that is your mother or father or a sibling and you're younger? Of course, it makes it harder, but we still have control over how much time we spend with someone. And one of the things that I'm really trying to also work on in my life is being much more direct in expressing my needs and expressing my truth. And I believe in facing the truth head on. A lot of people think the word confrontation is a bad thing, and confrontation just means you're willing to discuss the truth openly and honestly. So yes, if I found that anyone that I was spending extensive time with was dragging me down, that if I don't feel better having spent time with you, then I'm not going to make time for you in my life. And we have to have the courage to have those conversations. And we also have to have the courage and strength to be able to walk away from certain relationships if people aren't going to be doing that. And again, if this is, say, a parent, well, maybe don't live near them, but instead of talking to them 3 times a week on the phone and every time it sucks your energy out, maybe you talk to them once every 2 weeks. Like, I'm not saying you have to disown someone in your life, but I'm saying we still have control over that. And this idea of proximity and relationships is no different than our physical environment. If your goal is to do 75 hard, there are certain things you can set up in your physical environment to actually increase the chance that you'll do those things and decrease friction. First and foremost, if your refrigerator and your pantry is all full of junk food, then there is a higher tendency for you to eat junk food. Right. Like, that's the environment you've created. So if your goal is to clean up what you've been eating, we'll clean up the environment first. So the environment, very similar to the process, is what's going to heavily impact how we perform and how we behave. And I just want folks to be aware of, and here's one more, and I know this was a mouthful. This is not just for physical relationships of people we know in person. This is where social media can be really damaging, because if the people that you follow have toxic negativity or are constantly gossiping or always talking about things that bring you down, I mean, that's like eating junk food for your brain over and over. So, I believe in weeding the garden. I wouldn't follow or be connected with anyone on social media that wasn't adding something of value to my life. If their content doesn't educate me or inspire me or teach me something new, then I'm not going to follow them, no exceptions. And once a month, I go through and I weed out, the folks that aren't adding value to my life.
Is there a particular skill that you could help hone for somebody that's an entrepreneur, small business owner, someone that's in the weeds, just getting going, probably has some negative self-talk, probably has some pushback at home, probably maybe even on the ropes financially. I know I've been on the ropes a couple more than times I like to admit.
Sure.
What can you, outside of the cliche, like just don't quit, right? Because like over a long enough period of time, you'll be successful, whatever you start. It just has to be a long enough period of time, and you have to stick through it. But what is it, what kind of skill or what kind of advice can you give to someone that is in a state that's like that, where they're just, maybe struggling financially, struggling with their home life, maybe struggling with the business in itself, just working, just grinding? What do you recommend for somebody like that?
I think arguably the most important skill set any of us can develop is the ability to regulate our emotions. Emotional regulation is to have the awareness of what we're feeling, have an understanding of why we're feeling that way, but most importantly, be able to separate how we feel from how we behave. That's the key right there. There is nothing wrong with you feeling discouraged, disappointed, frustrated, angry. We have all of those emotions for a reason, even the unpleasant ones. They're basically guardrails to give us feedback on what's going on in the world. And it's okay to feel those things. But it's not okay to behave in a manner that's aligned with those. For example, I'm allowed to be angry at something, but I'm not allowed to be disrespectful or to diminish or demean you. Like, I have to be able to separate those two things. And when we can learn to process how we're feeling, but still choose to show up as our best self and still choose to make decisions that are in our and the people we care about, our best interests, the separation of the two is vital. And that's really emotional regulation. And it's really challenging to do. The average human being walking the planet, those two things are in lockstep harmony. When you're having a good day, you perform well. When you're having a bad day, you perform poorly. Or when you're feeling good, you perform well. When you're feeling bad, you perform poorly. And I want to try to separate the two. Perfect example, this podcast that you have, like, you need to show up and bring the heat regardless of how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know what type of morning you've had. You might have had a really stressful morning. You might have gotten some bad news that you were really disappointed, but you have to be able to still show up and conduct a fun interview like we're doing right now, regardless of how you feel. And there's a saying that Nick Saban, the former coach at Alabama football, used to say, and it's standard over feelings. And that really resonates with me. It means you need to make decisions and you need to show up and you need to treat others and you need to lead based on a standard, based on your core values, based on your convictions, not based on how you feel in the moment. As human beings, we are allowed to have low moods. We are allowed to have the feelings that we don't prefer, but we're not allowed to behave that way. And to me, I'm just now getting in a groove where I can separate those two.
Last one is, talk to me a little bit about next play. I used to play high school football, so I'm pretty familiar with next play. And then, I don't know, a lot of people know, but like the Sean Taylor, when he was talking to Greg Williams, and Greg Williams was giving him like an earful about some play that he had before. And Sean was like, "Coach, that was the last play. Like, we're on a new play now."
Oh, I love that. I wasn't familiar with that, but I love that. I mean, that's the definition of it right there.
Somewhere in those lines, it was like, "Coach, that was the last play. Like, we're on the new play now." Like, he can't go back.
No,
the play's not. He can't rewind it and go back. Right?
No.
Like, you just move forward.
Absolutely. Well, you just teed it up so perfectly. Next play is to stop worrying about what just happened and focus on what's happening right now. Stop worrying about what you wished happened and focus on the reality of what actually happened. In other words, it's to stop worrying about what was and focus on what is. So really, next play is a framework to dial you into the present moment, is to stop worrying about what's in the past, in the rearview mirror, and things that are unchangeable, and put all of your focus and attention and energy into the present moment where you can still make a difference. In sports, whether it's football or basketball, that's obvious. You throw an interception. Yeah, of course that wasn't what you wanted to do. It's not what you preferred to do. Right. And you wish that you could have that play back, but you can't. So the sooner you can get up to speed of the reality of that's what happened, what can I learn from this and move on? That's that next play mentality. And it's the reason that a player like a Stephen Curry is the greatest shooter in the history of the game of basketball. Now, there's a few reasons for that, but one of them is his ability to always focus on the next shot, on the next play. Steph can miss 5 shots in a row, but he doesn't drag that negative energy into the 6th shot. He shoots that 6th shot with the same confidence and optimism as if he had made the first 5. He can separate the fact that he missed a few shots before because he knows, as that story you just pointed out, like, that was a previous shot. That has nothing to do with the shot I'm about to take right now. So I'm still going to make this shot. And the next play mentality for me it's been an absolute game changer. Now, a couple of small caveats. One, there is a time and a place to look back and to learn a lesson. Like, that's the reason why basketball teams and football teams watch film, because you do need to go back the next day and say, okay, why did Chris throw that interception? Let's take a look at it. Was it because the offensive line didn't block and he was getting so pressured that he forced a bad throw? Was it because you made the wrong read on the defense? Was it just because you threw a bad, like, you need to figure out why you made that mistake so that hopefully you can take a lesson from it and not repeat that moving forward. So there is always a time to look back and evaluate and debrief and figure that out. But very rarely is that time in the actual moment, in the heat of the battle, which is why, if you throw an interception, we don't need to talk about it right now. We'll look at it at film tomorrow. Then I also believe there's a time to look ahead at the presumed future and prepare. So have an idea of what's coming up and what do I need to do today to put myself in the best situation possible to be successful when this situation arises. So there's a time to look back, a time to look forward. I just don't believe we should live in either one of those situations. I think we should spend most of our time and give most of our energy and focus in the present moment. And the last thing I'll say is when you do make a mistake, I would highly encourage first and foremost that you acknowledge that you made a mistake. Then I would hope that you take full ownership of it. Don't blame, complain, or make excuses. Don't point the finger to anyone else. If you are the quarterback in this example, don't blame your offensive line or blame the quarterback coach for not giving you the proper read on the defense. Like, accept the fact that you were the one that made the mistake. And you ask yourself, how was I complicit, or what was my role in making this mistake? That's the most important question you can ask. So you acknowledge it, and then you take ownership of it. Then the next thing you do is try to learn a lesson from it. There's an old saying, don't let an adversity go to waste. So whatever I can learn, or whatever gold that I can mine from this mistake, I want to learn a lesson so that it's not in vain. And then the last thing you do is you just flush it and you move to the next play. You don't worry about it again. If Tom Brady in his heyday kept thinking about the interception he threw last game,
right,
in what way is that going to benefit him today at this game? And it's not. So learning how to flush it and move to the next play is vital.
Alan, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, maybe talk to you more about the company you have, or maybe get you on stage or anything like that, where would they find you?
So the best thing they can do is go to alansteinjr.com. That's my website and the hub of everything that I do. It'll explain all of my different speaking programs and things that I offer. You can also follow me on all of the major social platforms at Alan Stein Jr. I'm very accessible and very responsive. So if any part of my conversation with Chris today resonated with you, don't hesitate to shoot me a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in any of the books I've written, Raise Your Game, Sustain Your Game, or my latest book, Next Play, you can get those on Amazon or Audible or wherever you like to get your books and audiobooks.
Alan, I appreciate you being on the show.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome.